There's something deeply complicated about human relationships that we often struggle to grasp, not because we lack the ability to understand, but because the truth usually hides beneath the surface. Emotions, as we feel them, are rarely simple. They're layered, mixed with memories, fears, hopes, and pieces of who we are. And when love enters the picture, true, meaningful love, it gets even more tangled. The signs that someone's heart is tied to yours don't always come through loud declarations or big romantic gestures. In fact, the deeper the emotion, the quieter the signs often are, especially when fear is wrapped around it. So many people live their lives puzzled by the emotional patterns of the ones closest to them. They ask, does this person truly care about me? Or are they just being kind, careful, or maybe even manipulative? But often the truth is less complicated and more heartbreaking than expected. They do care, a lot, but they're scared. They're afraid of what loving deeply might bring, afraid of losing control, afraid of being hurt, afraid of showing too much. And so they hide it. This fear doesn't mean love is missing. Actually, it usually means the connection is very real, because people don't guard themselves so strongly over something that doesn't matter. We build emotional walls not to protect what's shallow, but to shield what's delicate. When someone's heart is already attached to you, but they can't admit it, not even to themselves, it creates a unique kind of tension. You notice it in the way they glance at you just a second too long, only to look away. You feel it when they show up when it really matters, but act like it was nothing at all. You sense it in the way their actions don't always match their words, their behavior whispers things their voice can't say out loud. We're taught to think of love as something we express clearly spoken words, visible closeness, physical touch, constant communication. But sometimes real love, deep, soul-level love, shows up in silence, in hesitation, in emotional retreat, especially for those who've been hurt, rejected, or emotionally overwhelmed before a while. The mind starts to protect the heart in ways that aren't always logical. It says, if you don't say how much you care, then you won't be broken if they walk away. It says, if you pretend not to feel it, you won't have to feel the sting if it's not returned. The tragedy is that this kind of fear often silences the most beautiful parts of love before they even get the chance to live. But if you pay attention, if you look with emotional eyes, you'll find the signs. You'll find them in how someone's energy shifts around you, in the subtle ways they try to stay near, in the details they remember. These signs are steady. They're not random. They come from the heart, even when the mouth stays quiet. These signs don't need grand words or bold action. They don't require a person to be poetic or brave. They ask only for honesty and attention, a willingness to look past the surface and into the feelings beneath. Make no mistake, not every act of care is secret love. Not every quiet person is hiding deep emotions. But when two people share a connection that's hard to explain, when there's closeness that has no label, and silence that feels heavy, there's something true underneath it all. And that truth deserves to be seen. Hidden emotional attachment isn't a guessing game, it's the emotional footprints of a heart trying to move forward while the mind keeps pulling it back. Once you begin to understand these patterns, you stop seeing relationships for what they pretend to be and start seeing them for what they truly are. Take this, for example, when someone listens to you with more focus than they do anyone else. Even if they act calm and collected, that's a sign. When they recall little things you've said, even ones you forgot, that's another sign. When they search for reasons to stay nearby or seem uneasy when you drift away, that means something. These aren't just habits, they're emotional signals, often below the surface of awareness. You don't build that kind of attentiveness unless you feel something more. But the reason these emotions get buried is because sharing feelings comes with risk. Saying I care or I love you is like handing someone the key to your heart, hoping they won't break it. And if you've done that before, only to be left shattered, your mind remembers. So people play it safe. They care from a distance. They stay close enough to feel your presence, but far enough to protect themselves. And in doing so, they create a quiet struggle, a contradiction between a heart that's already chosen and a mind that's still building walls. This isn't about making fear look romantic or excusing emotional avoidance. It's about learning. Learning to read what's unspoken. Learning to feel what isn't expressed. Knowing that some of the strongest emotional bonds have never been put into words, not because they're weak, but because they're too strong for the level of safety that currently exists. You'll find the signs not in shouting, but in softness, in the pauses, in the mixed messages that still somehow feel steady, in the presence that shows up, even when words don't. And when you learn to see those moments clearly, you'll start to understand something powerful. Real love isn't always loud, but it is always there if it's true. We often think that people with deep feelings will make them obvious. That true love is bold, open, and fearless. But love isn't always that brave, especially when the stakes feel high. Sometimes, the stronger the emotions, the more hidden they become. Not because the person doesn't care, but because they care too deeply. Hiding how you feel isn't always a sign of apathy. It's often a defensive way to keep yourself from reliving past pain. A strategy the mind creates to keep the heart safe. And once you understand that, you start to see that someone's heart might already be yours, even if their words haven't caught up yet. When someone feels strongly for you but holds it in, it's not always manipulation or avoidance. More often, it's a way to keep their balance. If someone has lived through emotional chaos, betrayal, or heartbreak, they learn to protect themselves. Their mind tells them, stay neutral, stay safe. So even if their heart races in your presence, even if their thoughts are filled with you, their behavior may seem cold or detached. Not because they don't care, but because caring too much feels dangerous. The mind's first instinct is survival. When love has been linked to pain, rejection, or loss, the subconscious steps in and says, not again. It confuses now with then. It raises alarm bells. It says, don't get close. Don't speak. Don't feel. And this becomes a silent war between the heart leaning in and the body pulling back. This contradiction is confusing. It sends mixed messages. It causes the other person to question everything. But if you look carefully, you'll see that hesitation often means the opposite of indifference. It's not that love is missing, it's that fear is present. And fear is powerful. It's there to protect, but it also holds people back. When someone is afraid to show love, they're not just avoiding hurt, they're also avoiding hope. They stay in this middle space where nothing gets fully expressed. Love requires vulnerability. And vulnerability requires courage, the courage to risk being let down. But if someone's self-esteem is low or their past pain still lingers, that risk feels too high. So they hide behind calm expressions, sarcasm, distraction, logic, or humor. Some keep physical closeness but stay emotionally far. Some show care through small acts, hoping you'll understand because saying it would feel like too much. All these behaviors are forms of protection. Emotional shields. They're not lies, they're self-preservation. Guardedness is not a flaw. It's a coping tool. But it has a cost. When someone hides their feelings out of fear, they shut themselves out of something real. They lock their heart in a room of caution. And though it aches for connection, it fears the fall. Still, despite the quiet, despite the distance, their feelings remain. They care quietly. They wonder about you. They replay your words. They read into your expressions, looking for proof that it's safe to open up. But if they sense even a tiny hint of possible rejection, they pull away not because they don't want you, but because they aren't sure they could survive not being wanted back. This is why emotional hiding, while frustrating, is also meaningful. People don't go to great lengths to hide something they don't care about. They don't avoid eye contact, change topics, or pretend not to feel unless what they're hiding is too big to handle. And often what they're hiding is a love too strong for words. So when someone steps back, just when things are getting close emotionally, don't always assume it's because they're not feeling it. Sometimes it's because they're feeling it more than they know how to handle. Or when they act differently when you're around. Or when they seem to care more than they're ready to admit. That's not emptiness, that's a coping method. That's their way of handling something that feels too heavy for them to carry. You might want clarity. You might crave honesty. You may hope for transparency, and you're right to want that. But clarity doesn't always come easily from someone who's emotionally afraid. They need a sense of emotional safety before they can be fully open. They need to feel sure that being vulnerable won't lead to everything falling apart. And until they find that kind of safety, they'll stay behind the walls they've built around themselves. Those walls aren't meant to keep you away. They're built to trap their own fear inside. And unless you take time to understand those walls, no deep connection can really form. So don't be quick to judge someone who hides their feelings. Don't assume silence means they don't care. Try to look deeper. Try to understand that when someone holds back emotionally, it might be because their heart is already involved, and that level of involvement scares them. Emotional restraint in that case is actually a sign of hidden care, not the absence of it. Knowing this helps you move through human relationships with more wisdom. It helps you stay grounded in awareness instead of being swept away by reactions. It helps you recognize people for who they truly are, not just what they choose to show. And most importantly, it helps you understand that love, when it's real, often starts as a quiet whisper inside someone who isn't ready to speak just yet. When we think about love or emotional connection, we often picture grand gestures, big declarations, romantic nights, physical closeness. But real human emotion doesn't always show up like that. Sometimes when someone is emotionally pulled toward you but too scared to admit it, what you'll see instead are tiny patterns of behavior, small clues, quiet actions, subtle movements that speak louder than the words they won't say. These are micro behaviors, tiny, often unconscious signals that reveal emotional truths. The person might not even realize they're doing it. The thing is, the subconscious doesn't lie. It can hide. It can delay. It can push things down. But it doesn't lie. When someone has real emotional ties to you, even if they try to hide it, it comes through in what they do. It might be in how they lean in a little when you talk, or how their voice softens when you're upset, or how they remember something you mentioned months ago that you completely forgot about. That's not just being polite. That's not just a good memory. That's emotional focus. The brain doesn't hold on to things it doesn't care about. It remembers what it values. So when someone recalls your coffee order or checks in about something you casually mentioned, or gets anxious when you seem off, that's emotional investment. They may not be saying it directly. They might even be telling themselves they're just being nice, but emotionally they're already involved. Their thoughts keep circling around your well-being. Their nervous system reacts to you. These tiny moments, they're not small. They're signs that you mean more to them than they're comfortable admitting. There's a real psychological principle behind it. Repetition builds emotional pathways. If someone keeps showing up for you, helping you, being thoughtful without being asked, defending you when you're not around, that's not a random habit. That's subconscious emotional attachment. They're creating a rhythm with you at the center of it. And rhythms, even unconscious ones, are built around things that matter. You'll often spot it in the way they react when someone else has your attention. They might stay quiet. They might pretend they're fine, but their mood changes. They fidget. Their tone shifts. They smile less. That's not nothing. That's emotional attachment trying to stay calm while feeling uneasy. Those reactions show that they've given you a place in their world, even if they can't fully admit it yet. One of the clearest signals of hidden emotion is protectiveness. When someone cares deeply, they tend to look out for your peace, your comfort, your safety, even when it seems random. They might tell you to rest more, warn you about people they don't trust, check in after something tough happens. That protectiveness isn't always direct. Sometimes it comes out as a joke, or they act like it's no big deal. But if you pay close attention, you'll notice the timing is never random. It's care, finding a safe way to come through. It's also important to see how emotional connection can show up through contradictions. People who are emotionally attached but scared may act in ways that seem confusing. They might say they're not ready for closeness, but they still find time for you. They might say they don't want something serious, but they get quiet when you talk about other people. These aren't games. These aren't manipulations. More often, they're signs of an emotional tug-of-war happening inside. Their feelings are pulling them closer, but their fear or the memories of past hurt or their beliefs about love are pulling them back. The result is inconsistency, cracks in their usual defenses, glimpses of their true feelings peeking through. People who try to hide their feelings often think they're doing a good job, but human beings aren't built to fully hide emotion. It leaks out. If they feel something deeply, you'll see it sometimes more in their actions than in their words. Because words can be planned, words can be filtered. But body language, timing, tone, those are harder to fake. And even though it can feel frustrating to be on the receiving end of all this, it's also a chance to understand people more deeply. If you're paying attention, if you learn how to read the quiet signs, you'll start to see the truth beneath the surface. Some emotions don't want to be spoken. They just want to be noticed. They want to be felt and respected without judgment. When you start noticing the way someone changes when you're near, or how they show up when you need them, or how they try to delay goodbye, you'll understand that love doesn't always come with speeches. Sometimes it arrives in silence. It's there in how they brighten when you enter a room, even if they try to hide it quickly. It's in how they hesitate before ending a conversation, or how they look for reasons to reach out that don't seem necessary on the surface. These aren't coincidences. They're emotionally driven choices. So if you're wondering whether someone feels more for you than they say, stop focusing only on their words. Watch what they do when they think no one's watching. Because real emotion, especially when it's unspoken, shows itself through patterns, pauses, and presence. The truth about someone's heart isn't always in what they say. It's in their habits, their instincts, their quiet behaviors. The subconscious doesn't pretend. And when someone's heart has quietly chosen, you'll feel it in small ways long before they ever say it out loud. When someone holds deep feelings but is scared to face them, their emotions get unpredictable. You'll notice a push-pull pattern. One moment they're close, the next they pull away. And one day they're warm, the next they go quiet. It's confusing. But it doesn't always mean they've stopped caring. In fact, it can mean they're struggling with how much they do care. Fear doesn't stay still. It moves. It adjusts. It reacts based on what feels safe and what feels risky. When someone is emotionally drawn to you but scared of getting hurt, Their behavior changes from day to day. One day they might seem open and comfortable, even playful. The next day they're distant, distracted, or closed off. It's not that their feelings are gone. It's that their emotional system is trying to retreat from vulnerability. They're trying to get back to feeling in control. So this back and forth becomes their way of both moving toward you and pulling away at the same time. Sometimes you'll see them at their most genuine, fully present, laughing, listening, opening up. And then suddenly they pull back. Plans get canceled. Conversations feel shallow. They seem irritated or lost. That's not detachment. That's fear reacting to closeness. In that moment of openness, they felt something strong, and it scared them. Getting close felt like being too exposed, and to someone who hides their emotions, exposure feels dangerous. That's a key insight. The closer you get to what they're really feeling, the more they pull back. It's not about you. It's about how ready they are to carry the emotional weight of connection. So if they go distant after a deep moment, it's not because they don't care. It's because they cared so much it triggered self-protection. They might joke around, change the topic, act like nothing happened. But it's not random, it's a way of finding emotional balance again. Inconsistency becomes their shield. But don't confuse inconsistency with lack of feeling. Emotional inconsistency isn't always manipulation. Manipulation wants control. Emotional inconsistency often just wants safety. Inconsistency in this context is really just an attempt to regain control over one's own emotions. It's a tug of war between the part of them that craves connection and the part that sees connection as a threat. That internal struggle is what you're noticing on the outside. And unless you understand that, you might mistake their distance for disinterest. But in truth, inconsistency often shows that someone is emotionally involved but mentally unready. Their thoughts are still wrestling with their emotions. They haven't made peace between how they feel and what they believe is safe for them. And that unresolved inner battle often appears as hesitation. They might reach out just enough to stay close, but then back off before the relationship goes too deep. It becomes a balancing act, giving enough to feel a bond, but pulling back enough to feel safe. Pay attention to how they seem more attentive when they sense you're slipping away. That's not playing games, it's emotional regulation. They panic at the idea of losing you. Their attachment instincts take over. But once they feel secure again, their fears rise back up and they retreat. This cycle continues until either the fear is healed or the connection slowly fades under the weight of confusion. The emotional inconsistency you're seeing isn't random. It's the blueprint of a person battling themselves inside. It's someone caught in a fight between heart and mind. This kind of behavior can drain you emotionally if you don't know what's really happening. You might start to doubt your own instincts. You might begin to blame yourself for their retreat. But the truth is, you didn't cause this pattern. Your presence simply brought it to the surface. You became a mirror showing them something inside they haven't dealt with yet. You reflect what they truly want but aren't ready to reach for. And when people are faced with emotional truth they're not yet ready to handle, they tend to act in unclear, confusing, and inconsistent ways. That's why emotional intelligence is important. If you can recognize that their inconsistency comes from fear and not from a lack of care, you can respond with calm instead of insecurity. You don't need to fix them. You don't need to run after them. What you really need is clear discernment. You need to watch without getting pulled into their emotional storm. Because the deeper truth is this: someone who is emotionally conflicted still has feelings. Conflict doesn't come from a place of emotional emptiness. It only shows up when love and fear are pulling in opposite directions. That battle is what you feel in their shifting behavior. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do when someone is emotionally inconsistent is to stay grounded. Let them see that you're not unsure of who you are, even if they're unsure of what they feel. Your steady presence becomes a safe place. It may not guarantee that they'll overcome their fears, but it gives them a glimpse of what emotional safety looks like. And that glimpse can often be the first step from fear into freedom. Inconsistency is never easy to deal with. It tests your patience, your self-trust, and your emotional clarity. But when you begin to see it as the language of hidden love buried under fear, you stop taking it so personally. You begin to understand it for what it really is: a heart that's already leaning toward you, even if the mind hasn't caught up yet. There's something very telling in how people act when they care more than they're willing to show. Emotional reactions aren't random. They're often deep signs of hidden attachment, especially when those reactions are quiet, unexpected, or seem bigger than the situation calls for. When someone's heart is already involved but their fear keeps them from being open, pressure builds inside. And that pressure comes out in raw, unfiltered ways: defensive comments, jealousy, silence, mood swings, or frustration. These emotional reactions don't come out of nowhere. They're connected to feelings they haven't spoken out loud. Emotional reactivity is like a mirror. It reflects what's going on underneath the surface. The way someone reacts when you mention another person, or when you talk about making life changes, or when you simply pull your energy back a little, those moments reveal a lot. They might not say anything, but watch their tone. Notice their energy. Look at their eyes or their body language. These small signals speak volumes. When someone doesn't care, they remain emotionally distant. But when they care deeply, even little things carry emotional weight, and that weight shows up as reactivity. One of the strongest signs of unspoken emotional attachment is when someone becomes irritated without clear reason. When they care but feel emotionally helpless, that irritation becomes a wall. It helps them push you away without having to admit their vulnerability. They might criticize something small you said or find fault in something you did, and you're left confused, wondering why they're so tense. But beneath that surface tension is usually a soft spot being poked. Maybe they feel unseen, or maybe they're scared they don't matter to you the way you matter to them. Jealousy is another powerful sign of emotional depth. When someone responds coldly or passively when you bring up someone else, it's often a reflex. It comes from feeling like they're being replaced in your emotional world. They might not react in a loud or obvious way, but you'll notice a shift. They might become quiet. They might withdraw. That's not childishness, it's emotional fear. They're scared someone else is getting a spot they secretly wish they had in your life. And because they haven't spoken about their feelings, they don't know how to address the fear. So it shows up as distance or irritation. Another telling thing is how sensitive they become to your attention. If you take longer to respond to a message, if you seem less focused during a chat, if you appear more distant, they often feel it deeply. They might not say anything directly, but you'll see it in their behavior. They might act cold, aloof, or even try to act like they don't care. But underneath that reaction is disappointment. Not because of what you did, but because it triggered something they haven't voiced. They wanted more of your presence, even if they never asked for it. Their emotions aren't reacting to logic, they're reacting to longing. A longing they can't yet admit, but can't ignore either. Sometimes this reactivity looks like mood swings. One minute they're present and warm. The next they seem distant or distracted. This isn't necessarily about their true feelings towards you, it's more about their inner emotional system being overloaded. Being close to you gives them a high, but uncertainty makes them crash. That up and down becomes a cycle: closeness, followed by withdrawal, joy followed by silence. It's not about control or playing games, it's about emotions trying to break through a wall of fear. Even avoiding you can be a form of reactivity. When someone cares but isn't ready to face that care, they may avoid certain situations, topics, or even you altogether. It's not always because they don't want you around. Often it's because being near you reminds them of how much they feel and how little control they have over those emotions. Avoidance becomes a form of escape. It's less about rejection and more about overwhelm. This is why people sometimes vanish after emotionally intense moments. Not because they don't care, but because they're flooded with feelings they don't know how to handle. Understanding this takes emotional maturity. You need to see emotional reactivity for what it really is, not weakness, but a signal. It shows there's something unresolved, something they want but can't yet claim. And if you're not careful, you might think it's about you. But it's not. Their reactions are about their inner tension, not your worth. They're caught between wanting to be close and being scared to get hurt. And every time you get too close, that tension grows harder to hide. So when someone acts off after something small, when they go silent after a moment of real connection, when they seem distant after you mention someone else, pause before you judge. Look deeper. What you're seeing is emotional noise coming from a heart that's already attached but hasn't found the courage to speak. Their behavior may be all over the place, but their emotions aren't absent. In fact, their emotional reactions might be the clearest sign that their heart has already chosen you, even if their voice hasn't caught up. Here's what most people miss. Emotional inconsistency doesn't mean a lack of emotion. It often means too much emotion. So much that the person doesn't know where to place it, or how to carry it without breaking. It's not that they don't feel. It's that they feel so deeply, they've learned to fear their own feelings. They don't trust the intensity of their own hearts. They're afraid that if they lean in too far, they'll lose themselves in the process. This isn't coldness. This is caution. This is someone who's been burned before. Maybe by love, maybe by life, maybe by their own vulnerability. So now they guard their soft places with silence, with distance, with emotional detours that make no logical sense. But if you pay close attention, you'll see the cracks in their armor. You'll notice how their eyes linger just a little too long. You'll feel the weight in their pauses, the shift in their voice when they say your name. You'll recognize the way they lean in, even when they're trying to pull back. Because emotional suppression can only go so far, before the truth begins to leak out in whispers and reactions.